Now, a lot of people don't know this, but Chris Davis was a member of the Texas Rangers at the beginning of his career. He got drafted by them out of college, and he was able to make his debut in 2008. In 2008, he hit 17 homers, only played 80 some games, had a lot of power, and showed that potential with them. Now, in 2009, he was able to hit over 20 homers. Just in about like 30 some more games, he was able to bat in the 230s, but the Rangers didn't feel him as a valuable part of their team because he had a high strikeout rate. And this kind of showed with their planning in 2010, where he hardly got any playing time. And in 2011, he hardly got playing time as well. But he ended up getting traded to the Baltimore Orioles, who was willing to give him more playing time. He got traded with Tommy Hunter for Koji Uehara, and Koji Uehara ended up doing really well, not for the Rangers, but for the Red Sox. He was able to throw the last out of the World Series in 2013. Now, in 2012, Chris Davis was able to have a breakout year. He had over 30 homers, batted 270. Very well, very good for a guy who wasn't really supposed to amount to really much at the time. And in 2013, he experienced an amazing breakout year, right? Over 50 homers, 286 batting average, over 1,000 OPS, had well over 100 RBIs. Like, he was very good, and he would have won MVP if Miguel Cabrera didn't almost win the batting title like he did in 2012. In 2014, he kind of experienced some rough patches during that time. He ended up getting busted for steroids. He ended up batting under 200, only hit 26 homers. Didn't play too much, but that's not really a season you think he'd have after having that amazing 2013 year. But he did come back in 2015 because he hit like 47 homers, well over 100 RBIs, 262 batting average, an OPS well over 900. Like, he had a very good year. But in that year, he did lead the league in strikeouts, which was 208 strikeouts, which of today is 8th all-time in a season, tied with Aaron Judge, who did that in 2017. And Chris Davis was very good, right? Despite his strikeouts, he had a lot of power. He was very good. And the Orioles decided after that 2015 year, they wanted to give him a 7-year, $161 million deal. No team options, no opt-outs, everything was guaranteed. Now, this was a huge mistake for the Orioles, and a lot of reasons, right? Number one, you never sign a power-hitting only first baseman to that kind of deal. Because they just can't play enough positions where, say they don't work out at first base, you can move them outfield. You can't do that. They're only a first baseman. And second, as a power hitting only first baseman gets older, their batting average becomes horrible, right? They bat under 200. Just look at Ryan Howard with the Phillies. Once he signed that contract, he started to get into the later half of his career, right? And he ended up doing horrible. He only hit 20-some homers, bat very low 200s, maybe even below that. And it was rough. I don't like giving first baseman that kind of contract anyway. Miguel Cabrera and Albert Pujols did deserve it. Whenever Pujols got well over a $300 million deal, Miguel Cabrera got a $200-some million deal. They deserved it because they were all around very good. They hit for a high average. They hit a lot of home runs. They walked a lot. They were very good. But injuries kind of altered them, and now their contract isn't that great. But they still were deserving of it. But now, Chris Davis is... It's just not good. And for the second reason that this wasn't good for the Orioles is that the Orioles have one of the lowest payrolls in baseball. They had that at that time as well. They didn't have a high payroll. Now, the Phillies could get away with that Ryan Howard contract because they have a lot of money. They're a big market. They're able to afford that where they can spend $20 million on him and still build a good team around him. Now, for the Orioles, they couldn't do that. They had limited money. This was going to hurt them for years and years to come if he didn't pan out. And once 2016 rolled around, he was okay. He hit in the 220s, which isn't good, but he hit 38 homers, so a lot of people kind of ignored that because he had almost 40 homers. That's very good. And in 2017, he definitely had his worst year of his career for the Orioles. Well, I guess, 2014 was bad, but this was pretty bad too. He only hit 26 homers, 60-some RBIs, batted slightly over 200, struck out a lot. It was just rough. But then 2018 came around, and his tenure, from 2018 to 2019, kind of defined the Orioles. It was just very bad. The Orioles only won 47 games and just over 50 games the year after. And in 2018, Chris Davis only hit 16 homers, batted 168. It was very rough. And in 2019, it was very similar. He only hit 12 homers, batted in the 170s. It just wasn't good. And in 2020, he started the season off 6 for 50-some. like 50 some at bats. He only had 6 hits, and he ended up suffering a season-ending injury. Now, a lot of this has to do with they're playing a huge shift on him, right? I mean, he is striking out a lot, but he's hitting it into the shift a lot. The third baseman is going from third base to pretty much shortstop. The shortstop is pretty much moving to second base. The second baseman's going to the outfield. And that leaves third base wide open, but he doesn't really care. He keeps pulling the ball, hitting it into the shift, hitting what would be base hits into ground ball outs. And it's just really tough, and it really hurts you. But if he could just ignore trying to hit for power, trying to hit those extra base hits that he used to a long time ago, he just needs to bunt. Like, he just needs to bunt down the third base line whenever the bases are empty. If I was the manager during this whole offseason, I would just have him practice bunting down the third base line. And during the games, no matter what the score is, I don't care. If third base is empty, bunt. Do this so that they can get him out of the shift, because that's what really hurting him. If he just keeps bunting down the third base line, they're not going to play a shift on him anymore. And those base hits, or that would be base hits, that he hits right to the second baseman playing in the outfield, those end up being base hits. Like, it's just crazy. So, I'm going to show you his batting splits from 2019. His batting splits from bases empty, men on, and men in scoring position. So, with the bases empty, he only batted 149. He had a majority of his at-bats with bases empty. He was horrible. With men on, he batted 227. And men in scoring, he batted 231, which is way better than what he ended up doing that season. So now let's look. Say he decides to bunt. Say he, with bases empty, he gets a bunt hit a fourth of the time he has bases empty. So we'll have a 250 batting average with bases empty. He ends up hitting 239 for that year. That is amazing. Like, that's not amazing, but it's way better than what he would have if he just kept doing what he was doing, which was in the 170s. So now let's change that number from 1/4 to 1/3, so he gets a hit on 1/3 of the bunts that he does with bases empty. He's now hitting 282. He's batting 282, which would be his best since his 2013 year, if he just bunted. Now, if he just keeps doing this, like I showed you before, they're not going to play a shift on him. If they keep playing the shift on him, just keep bunting. Just keep getting those base hits. It's really going to benefit the Orioles because you're paying so much of this guy who's batting in the 160s, 170s, and you're getting no value of him, paying him over $23 million a year. And you got to make him as valuable as he can. Like, I know, like, when you're up to bat, you want to hit homers. Like, you want to hit extra base hits. You want to do all that. But Chris Davis isn't doing any of that. He's getting outslugged by pitchers. It's just really rough. And I feel like if he cares about baseball, he cares about his team winning, he'll bunt down the third base line with no one on. I know it isn't like this, like, amazing idea where I looked into it. It's just like a fact. Like, I think all lefties should do that. Just bunt until, if you're frustrated with them playing the shift on you, just bunt down the third base line. Like, that's all he has to do. And, like, he's not going to win the batting title doing this, probably. He still could miss a bunt and end up striking out. Like, that could happen. But if he's able to do this, like I showed you, just 1/4 of the time, it would be so much more valuable for the team batting 239 than he would be batting in the 170s. And it's just amazing, like, just to look at that and to look how, like, the Orioles had a lot of competitive games in 2020. They went 25-35, way better than they were the last 2 years. They have a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. But they're kind of forced to play Chris Davis because of his contract. They don't want to sit him because you're sitting a guy that's getting paid $23 million, and he's just in a rough situation with the Orioles. And that's the only way I can see him getting fixed, if he just bunts down the third base line.